gentlemen, boys and girls, and doctors. I'm Scott McDonald of Dr. Demographics. And as you know, every week we do a new program. And I try to deal with the trends that are most of interest and important to you. So that's what we're going to talk about today. This is not going to be the typical session. Typically, I try to keep these under half an hour. I'm going to have to go longer here because the range of things I have to discuss are long. I think you'll find it interesting and useful. I think all doctors will, but I am of particular concern for those who are young doctors or people considering getting into the profession, or I should say healthcare overall. There are things that have been going on that I find a little disturbing. Articles that have come out recently, and well, let's just cut to the chase. Today, we're going to be talking about rules for dental, medical, veterinary, optometric, etc. For those of who really want to know what's going on and have a demographer who cares about them. And that's me. I'm a demographer who cares about you, and I want to give you good advice. Now, I've been working with doctors for, it's hard to believe, but it's going on 40 years. I've written books and articles on demographics and practice promotion for a very long time. And in that time, I have been to every state in the United States. I've been to all the major counties. I have been in the offices of hundreds, if not thousands of doctors. And in that time, I've come to appreciate you. And I'm not kidding when I say this. I admire you all very much. I know the technical idea is, doctors are rich and that this is a real prestigious thing. I happen to know from so many conversations, breaking bread with doctors, that this is a lot of stress and it's hard. The uncertainties are real. And when it comes to young people who are considering getting into the profession, these are the people who older doctors are going to sell their practices to. And I know they want them to do well, but they're trying to get a sense of what happens. Now, you also know that healthcare is a legacy business. If we look back at your career, you probably had a family member or a very close friend who helped get you into the profession to begin with. I'm going to be talking to you on that basis. Let's say you have a son, a daughter, a cousin, nephews and nieces, grandkids even, that are thinking about getting into healthcare. There are so many reasons right now to be scared of it and to think, I shouldn't do it, get out. Well, that's not a good idea. There are lots of good reasons to stay in healthcare and to want to get into the profession to begin with. It is not the profession that you're going to make vast amounts of money easily, but there are things going within healthcare that, well, frankly, I think you want to share this video with other people. Send this to your young friends, your kids, grandkids who are thinking about becoming doctors themselves. So what I'm going to be talking about are the industry trends that are happening right now and how you want to think about the professions that deal with healthcare where you own a practice. Now, I will say there are lots and lots of people out there who are saying what you need to do is to work for someone else who owns a practice, and you shouldn't try to own one yourself. They are very big on saying, get rid of the headaches. You don't need the problems with staff and suppliers. You don't need to have leases. Now, in this, I may be a little old-fashioned, but I believe a larger number of people want to get into the healthcare professions because they can have control over their lives and their fortunes. Now, let me go on and kind of explain a little bit more as to why I'm bringing this up. Dr. Demographics deals with where to put a practice. And by the way, I'm calling this Rules for Dental, Medical, Veterinary, etc. School. Now, we deal with the where issues. Where should I put a practice? Where can I go? Where are the places that I'm going to have hope of having the most success and having the most success in the shortest possible time? I get that. You see, one of the things that we're seeing is a certain telescoping inward, a shortening of how long it takes to become profitable, and a lengthening of the time that you can be in practice. There was a time, and it was a long time, in which if you were in practice for 15 to 20 years, that you completely maxed out your time in practice. Those are trends which are kind of behind us. And in fact, things are happening. Corporate ownership, multi-doctor partnerships, these things didn't happen way back when, but they're happening much more now. And the sophistication of owning and operating a practice, it's changing. And where those practices can do well and where they're not doing well changes. So please sit back, enjoy this little session. And I want to tell you some things that maybe you haven't thought about and maybe give you a little hope. It may surprise you, but there's a lot of bad advice out there. It often comes from lenders, educators, competitors, realtors, consultants, and speakers. I have been to so many lectures recently where they're telling young doctors, don't do it. Now, they may mean well. They may. I have a feeling a lot of them don't, because they're employed by people whose fortunes depend upon you getting out of the business. Now, there was a very, very good article recently in the Wall Street Journal, December 1st edition, called High Debt Hamstrings New Professionals by Rebecca Smith and Andrea Fuller. It was very good, but frankly, very depressing. And I am not doubting what they had to say, because I think it was well researched. But I think what really came and brought this to my mind is there's a certain sense of hopelessness for young doctors and even small business owners of all types throughout the United States to stay out of practice and out of business. I disagree. I've been in business for a very long time, and I can't think of anything more fun and frankly, more profitable than what we've done in starting and operating a business. And this goes for practices, especially in healthcare. Now, I've organized my thoughts into 10 commandments. Oh, no, they're not really commandments. They're just 10, I want you to think about this kinds of things, all right? But, 10 is an easy number to remember, and I thought, it kind of seems wise. As I'm growing older, losing my hair, getting a little gray, I'm beginning to go gray, maybe you'll notice. The thought that what I have to say here might be of value to the next generation is why I want to transcend the news of the hour. Now, frankly, this is what I would tell someone who I really care about. If I don't care about you, I wouldn't say these things. I'd just say, oh, you're on your own. Give me your money. And, I should say this too. Look, I don't think I'm going to make a dime from this little lecture. I don't think anybody's going to run to their computer and order from Dr. Demographics. But I'm saying this because I care about you and you've been very good to me. I mean the profession. Now, some of you are going to think, this doesn't make sense. It's a little counterintuitive, and I understand that. I get it. Just stick with me, all right? These are suggestions intended on how to handle the market that you're facing, but the market right now. I believe much of what I'm going to tell you is not going to be of value in 5 years. I think the marketplace is changing. Could be that I'm going to be completely wrong, but I don't think so. And I've been doing it long enough to kind of see patterns that I want you to be aware of. Now, I'm going to start off with something that is really not the biggest piece of advice. It's not that urgent, but I bring it up to young doctors because they make a decision on where they want to go to school based upon sometimes silly things. They'll say, well, is this place in Texas or in Florida, in Illinois, going to be a good place to practice, and I should therefore go to school there? Look, let me just start off with saying this. Do not plan on living near your school. You do not want to go to medical or dental or professional school near a place because it's a good place to practice. You're going to find, in fact, the opposite is true. However, I understand that the place that you spend some years is going to feel familiar, and it feels like home, and you'll develop friends, and you may even do the crazy thing of starting up your family and getting a home near the place you go to school. Listen, generally speaking, realtors are saying do not buy a house near where you're going to school. I'll explain a little bit why in a moment, but overall, don't do it. You're going to be there for only a short period of time, 3-4 years. Even if you want to go into the faculty, the reason you teach in a professional school is because it happens to fit your schedule, not because that's the aspiration for most doctors. It isn't. As a general rule, these places are not growing. I mean, where the medical and dental and vision schools are. And they also tend to have a lot of poverty and a lot of competition. Now, the reason that they're set up there to begin with, in case you haven't figured this out, is there's a lot of indigent poor, and they put the dental school or medical school or optometric program or veterinary program near where there are lots of people who can't afford services, and therefore they can offer those services at a very low rate or free of charge. What they're looking for are people to put through the mill of the school to have people to treat. That is not a good reason to live there. In fact, it's a disincentive to live there. I want you to consider that when you graduate from the school that you're going to, move on and even move away. Yeah, you can always come back and have Old Home Week and have the reunion and all that stuff. That's great. However, it's not where you want to practice most of the time. Now, let me point out Loma Linda, which happens to be down in Southern California, Riverside County. I love Loma Linda. I've spoken there many, many years. Great place. And even Riverside County is one of the places that's growing best in Southern California. However, the number of doctors who are practicing there is huge. You don't want to get into that. Move on. I want you to find a place in the United States that needs you. Now, what I'm saying is, when it comes down to figuring out where to practice, I want you to have a win. I want the place that you consider going for the first place you practice to be a place that has a long-term potential for you. It may not be perfect, and you may not stay there for a super long time. And in fact, as I track the trends on what new doctors, young doctors are doing upon graduation, is they will often plan on going where they got a job. And that's fine. But that may not be what you want as far as owning a practice is concerned. What I'm really looking for is when you graduate, when you get away, you're finding a win. Where's a place that I can have a success? Where's a place I can pay that debt down? Where's a place that I can hone my skills? A lot of you should be considering the military or the Indian Health Service. A lot of places that will be not hard to get into, that will provide you a positive cash flow and allow you to hone your skills right away. No, these are not places near schools. Actually, many of these places are going to be isolated, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I want you to find a place where you can have a positive cash flow right out of school. And that's why finding a place not necessarily is a place to own right away, but a place to get your skills up right away. That's why the military, Indian Health Service, and other kinds of clinic environments may serve the best opportunity for you. Now, I got that off my chest. Let's talk about helping you get out of debt. And I want you to actually do something crazy, which is to shop tuition rates. Now, I realize there are a lot of recruiters in professional schools that want you to come and join their program. And they'll talk about how much money their graduates make. And they'll talk about, just how wonderful the environment is. And you can play ping pong during your breaks, which you won't have very many of. And I really want to say the thing I most want you to come to isn't about the clinical expertise that comes out of medical, dental, other schools. I want you to shop their tuition rates. Now, that is something that a lot of people never talk about, but it is a reality for young doctors today because the cost of going and getting your professional training is going up. Now, you probably already know this, but the cost of money is going up, which in other words means because of inflation, the same amount of money that you were earning 3 or 4 years ago isn't going as far. You'll also note that some places have crazy high tuitions. Now, they'll try to justify it, and I'll talk about how they'll do that, but they'll try to justify really high rates. I have nothing against these wonderful schools, and I have been asked to lecture at a large number of them, and I appreciate them. Look, I love USC and UCLA. I love them. They're great. But have you checked the tuition rates? And yes, they graduate very good people, and getting a specialist degree is wonderful. But remember, you have to pay that money back. And the shorter time that it takes for you to be able to come up and get out of debt, the more successful you're going to be in the rest of your life. So yes, I want you to shop tuition rates. Here is a truth that I don't want you to forget. No one is going to ask you where you went to school. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you're applying for a job, they may say, oh, did you belong to my club? Did you live in the place that I lived? And they'll say, do you know this professor? And that's all great. But the fact is, no one's going to really ask, not any of your patients, certainly, and of course, none of your vendors are really going to care. Everybody assumes you're a doctor. And therefore, it's foolish to consider anybody but another doctor, mainly a competitor, is going to care. Some people say, well, if I graduate from this school and it puts me in this area, they've got fantastic reimbursement rates. Well, that's wonderful, but it's not important, at least not now. You've got to get through school at the least expense possible. You got to get the degree and you got to get that license, as I'll mention. I want you to forget about reimbursement rates and the other factors that so many people say are vital for now. I don't worry about the cost of living while you're going to a professional school. Some people will say, oh, Chicago, it's so expensive. Oh, well, look, the truth is, it is. It's very expensive there. But you're going to be living in a rat hole while you're going to school. You think I'm kidding. No, you'll see it's a rat hole. It really is. I've been to these rat holes, and you're going to learn very quickly that the cost of living is relative. So you're not going to be living in a quality of life location. You're going to have to look for a place that you can afford to go to school, which is big expense, but don't worry about the cost of living. If you can get into a good program, that's fine. But the cost of living about campus is not going to be the biggest part of your expenses. It'll be your tuition and supplies and the other things you have to do to get through your program. I want you to worry about unreasonable debt. Now, an orthodontist that I know, wonderful person, by the way, and very gifted, spent more than $1 million to get through his orthodontic program. $1 million. Now, he got out and he's starting to pay back his loans, which is great. And he's hasn't defaulted on anything. That's a lot of money, though. I want you to understand unreasonable debt is what you're looking at, not the fact that you're going to have debt. Debt comes with the territory. So I'm just saying, I want you to shop tuition rates. Don't worry about it over much, but just remember, keeping your debts down while you're in school is a good idea because costs are rising dramatically. And let me explain something as well. Getting to a super great, fantastic school with a wonderful reputation is like wetting your pants while you're wearing a dark suit. I mean by that, it may give you a nice warm feeling, but no one's really going to notice. Okay. Now, look, I want you to go to a good school, a reputable place where that has a reputation that is teaching the students. But I want you to remember the reputation that you're earning or the school's reputation is not nearly as important as you might think it is. And that includes people who go on to specialty school. Now, listen, I believe getting a specialist certification or degree is fine. It's a good idea. But I don't necessarily think you need to do it immediately. And even those programs need to be shopped out. Tuition rates count. Now, remember, you want a license to practice. That is your primary goal. It is not your ego. Well, let's put that ego aside. What you need to do is to maximize your ability to learn as much as you can while you're in school, to put your skills to the test, to actually do the things that you can do in a professional program. That's what's important. Does it mean you have to go through the accelerated, super fast school? Well, it might be wonderful if you can, but it is less important than the license. That's your goal. I want to talk to you for a second about prestige schools. I'm going to get myself probably in trouble if I start announcing who I've worked at where I've been a guest lecturer and all that stuff. Look, I like those prestige schools as much as anybody, and some of them are just remarkable, but they're not everything. And sometimes finding a school that you are just going to get really good skills and be able to apply yourself and get out in a reasonable period of time. Well, look, going to a prestige school may make your grandma proud of you, and it may impress your mentors, but they won't increase your bottom line or production or collections. I say this because so many people are going to the middle quality schools, state schools, let's say, some that are small, some that are in isolated locations. But remember, if you are going to a school where you can get a license and you can get it without putting yourself in too much debt, you're going to be fine. You're going to be much better off. Now, remember that a lot of the programs that you're getting at are 2 or 3 times as expensive in the prestige school as the others. The question comes down, am I getting a relative benefit out of doing that? And I think the experts that I've talked to are saying, no, you're not. So therefore, you have to consider, what am I getting out of my education in a professional school? Now, if you go to a prestige school, you're not going to impress your patients and justify a higher rate. It doesn't mean someone's going to hire you because you came out of this really great program and they'll want to hire you and snap you right up because they're going to make money on the production and collections from your work. Usually, as the price of education goes up, if you apply yourself while you're in school and increase your skills, that's the reason you're going, not because of the reputation of the school. I'm just saying, be careful. The only thing that these prestige schools really are going to do is to help you dig your debt hole even deeper. And I don't want you to do that. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get a good education in some of the really prestige programs that are out there. I think you can really learn a lot. But I'm just saying that the quality of the education has to be measured against the cost of going there. And some people are saying, well, am I worthy of the school? Look, personally, I believe that when you pass the entrance exams, you're going to be fine if you get in. Don't worry about everything else. I want to talk to you about going and become a specialist. Because the first thing a lot of doctors say is, ooh, I'm going to earn so much money if I become a specialist. Yeah, well, you may earn more. Okay, I've fully recognized that becoming a healthcare professional, a specialist can be helpful on the road to wealth. I believe that's a good thing. However, it's not everything. It is something, but it's not everything. You might want to be a productive doctor, and I'm talking about a primary care doctor first. Then worry about specializing later. So some people will start off their professional program and saying, ooh, I really want to move up and become a big fancy schmancy specialist because that's always what I've wanted. And my mom and dad will help me pay for it. Or, my uncle has a place for me. But they kind of forget the fact that often what you're trying to do is to become a general doctor so that you can become a good doctor. I have found that general practitioners who have applied themselves and worked hard may actually make a lot of money, but they also are better doctors. They can deliver services quickly and well. And I want to emphasize that's not an insignificant benefit to what you're trying to do. Now, remember, you can go back to school later when you have more money and less debt. But I know that the schools want to say, oh, no, start our program wide open, because that's in their best interest, but not necessarily in yours. Yes, getting a specialized degree or a certification, fantastic. I love it. But remember, you have to be productive to get to that point, and I would rather have you do that without the pressure of added debt right now. All right, so you may have to put your aspiration to become a specialist off for 2 or 3 years. It's well worth it. And if you happen to be in a program and I bring up working for the prison system, or I bring up being in the military, or the Indian Health Service, look, these are ways still to get your feet wet, to pay off your debt, and to be wise in the development of your career. You may want to think in terms of phases in your career rather than trying to bite off a huge chunk. Now, the debt that a lot of young doctors are getting into is caused by the fact that they're putting off actually having a productive career in favor of getting a fantastic education. And they kind of want to do it all right now. But the doctors that I've known, and I've known a lot of them, I know maybe more than you'll know, have told me again and again, I don't know why I rushed to embrace all these changes. In fact, what I should have done is enjoyed my experience and made sure that I'm becoming a better doctor. Longevity in practice is getting longer. Now, I kind of mentioned at the beginning, it used to be that doctors would practice for 15 years. By the time they were, say, 30, they would retire at 45 or 50. That isn't happening as much as it used to. Part of the fact is getting an education in healthcare is expensive. It takes a long time. In particular, if you want to add to that, the specialist training is required to get to the upper echelons. But it is undeniable that you can practice maybe 10 years longer than you were even 10, 15 years ago. So don't feel that you have to rush. Make sense that what you're doing is investing in you, not just your practice, but in your skill set. And I also bring up something else. Sometimes I think people forget that we really need good GPs, good generalists who know how to work with a staff and equipment, can develop technique and are fast at their technique and can do that thing which people don't think they're getting paid for, and that's diagnosis. One of the things about being a GP is you have the chance to see a lot of cases. And the more cases you see and the more people you meet and the new technologies that come out will make you a better doctor. So let's take a deep breath for a second and consider you're a doctor first, and you may do all the additional things a little later. Now, I want to bring up the idea of endodontists. Now, I know maybe you're not in dentistry and you don't care about endodontics, but I will be honest. I'm hearing from so many endodontists that they're scared. General dentists used to never do root canals, ever, any kind. Now they're saying, well, I'll handle a single canal. Yeah, I can do the bicuspids. Yeah, I can. Well, look, they're encroaching upon the bailiwick of the specialist. And endodontists are one of the first to get it. And they're suffering, particularly in major metropolitan areas. People are not willing to drive as far to an endodontist as they once did. They want them to be very close, convenient to their work and to their home. Now, the same thing is true of oral and maxillofacial surgeons. A lot of people are recognizing, I can do extractions too, even though I'm a GP. And they sort of assume that they'd have a better chance because they have much better clinical training and they understand the pharmacology better to be an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. But there are so many people who are GPs who are doing OMS. Now, this is not reserved for dentistry. This is also true in a lot of other professions. Lots of surgeons are finding there's little encroachments. And there are hybrid practices that are springing up, and you're having to deal with this. Pediatric dentistry and ortho has become very common hybrid mixes. I will be honest with you, as a demographer, I will tell you there are some places that you should consider doing this, and some places you should not. The demographics of the area will determine not just whether it's a good idea, but if there's too many other people practicing in it, and if the demographic character of the population will support this hybrid type practice. There are several other hybrid type practices. And dermatology, for example, orthopedics, pediatrics, that will have this same phenomenon. But I'll just say, just recognize there is a little more thought that needs to go into whether or not becoming a specialist is really for you and if the market that you're in will support you. Remember, a lot of specialists purchase their homes. Their kids are getting older. They feel they don't have the freedom to move. And when that happens, they have to find a place desperately where they won't be putting themselves at risk. And that's a problem for them. Now, I want to talk to you for a second about rural practices. There are folks who believe rural is best. If I can get away from everybody else in the big city and have a huge house and horses or when I have lots of dogs or whatever, they think rural is the answer. But I'm going to tell you, there are really good reasons on the upside and really bad reasons on the downside. Your income, every time you go to a lower population density, and is how we say rural in demographer circles, is your income is going to go down. There's nothing that is going to save you as far as that's concerned. Urban practice areas are always going to be more productive, more richer, but the overhead is always higher. I also want to remind people who are thinking about a rural location, it's like living on an island. You can really feel isolated. You're not going to have many colleagues. And sometimes that is good and sometimes that's bad, but I just kind of have to remind people there are good reasons why going rural is great and reasons that it's bad. And I'm bringing that up because the cost of developing a practice and doing a startup or joining an existing practice that has a rural site may be good and may be bad. And growth and demography matter a lot. The other thing I want to kind of remind you is something that came out of the bell curve. It's a book about smart people. How do they live? What do they do? Are doctors the same as everybody else? And the answer is no, they're not. And one of the reasons they're different is because a lot of doctors marry other doctors. You don't have to go to an area that is just for one good person. You got to figure out, is this going to work for two of us who want to have a practice? Many of you haven't started your families yet, or more likely have a family, and the commute hell that you have to go through in order to accommodate two professionals can be remarkably hard. All I'm saying is rural is not an answer to anything, particularly if you have dual career priorities. So you may not want to practice with them. You may be in a different profession than your spouse or significant other. So we have to take that into account too. Your commute times are increasing when it comes to rural practices. The time that it takes to get to the office, the cost of fuel, which is not insignificant these days, your home life, and the prestige that you're kind of losing by going to a rural, even a suburban location, can be very hard for some doctors. So I just want to say there are some realities to the demography of going rural that you may not have thought about. Competition can be tough when there's a small geographic population density, in other words. Let's kind of deal with those issues as we go, but don't assume that it's an answer to everything. But when you go rural, the cost of living and the quality of life can be much greater. But you must be a self-contained unit as a family to be able to take advantage and not go crazy of the cost of living and the quality of life. It's a thing. Now, I'm going to bring up a topic that is potentially going to get me in huge trouble. But young doctors, you may be thinking, when should we start our family? And I mean by that, should we have kids or should we not? And when should we do it? And believe it or not, in this little lecture, because we're dealing with young doctors, where they're going to go, how they're going to develop their careers, I'd figure I'd put my thumb right in your eyeball and bring it up. And what I'm going to say may surprise you. You want to start your practice and you want to have a family, believe it or not, sooner rather than later. And you're going to say, are you out of your mind? Wouldn't it be better to start my practice when I'm rich and famous and already doing great things? Shouldn't I start my family when we're well established and I have a house and my spouse has got their career? Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. You will never have enough money and you will never have enough security. Enough is an illusion, okay? I'm telling you something that I want you to know in my years of advising young doctors that I don't want you to forget. Enough is not going to come. Now, what about all the sacrifices? I thought we'd want to go to Europe. I thought we'd want to go to Asia. What about the arts? I want to eat out. I want to have all these things. Look, you can always go out and travel. You can always do all those things. But if you try doing it when you're too young, you're actually making a mistake. You want to use your youth and your energy when it's going to have the most effect on your practice and your life. And I know I'm going to get somebody mad at me. I get hate mail all the time. Here's the truth. Too late is real. There will come a time in which you're going to say, I don't have the steam to have more kids. I will say, having children has been one of the great joys of my life. I have a large family. I have a lot of grandkids, and I'm really glad that I started young. And you're going to say, well, sure, Scott, that's fine for you. You live in Utah. And yes, I do. I live in Utah. But I'm going to tell you, you're not going to get more energy, more enthusiasm, more life ahead of you than when you're younger. That's why I'm going to say I would move on that soon, not late. The energy that it takes to go into the office on the weekends is something that is best reserved for those who are young. Chasing around 2-year-olds is not an easy thing when you're old. Trust me. Now, you're going to define your happiness. One of the reasons people become doctors is because they have a sense of control in their lives. They can choose when they're going to be happy. What makes you happy? I guess that's up to you. But one of the things I want to avoid with young doctors who are considering the issues of debt, and if you're thinking about going to school or to a specialist program, just remember, these things don't bring you happiness. Happiness is something you find along the way, like precious diamonds on the path of your life. I want you to enjoy what you do every day. If you can't do that, I don't care how much success or money you have or that illusory security, it isn't going to work for you. And this is also going to get me in trouble, but I still know it's true. Family has a wonderful focusing effect in life. If you're a young doctor, you're going through school with little ones, You won't get the sleep that you want. You're going to have to do extra call. You're going to try to find jobs. You're going to have to commute to a place to work. And I know it can seem like hell, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, it doesn't matter. I think family is going to be one of the great focuses of your life. And by the way, it's not just kids. It's time with your extended family, brothers and sisters and parents who will leave you all too soon. It's extremely likely that you won't believe me. I know that. But if you talk to your parents and grandparents, they may have a different answer. Still, I know I'm right about this. Having a family makes you more successful as a doctor. The ability you have to relate to people, young and old, goes up dramatically when you happen to have the perspective of children. There's something about the little ones who really will make your life worth living and will help you to be a better doctor and a healthcare provider. And I also want to go one step further. A practice that is yours is not just a practice. And this is a little controversial because I have found that a lot of doctors want there to be instant success where they feel like you don't have to risk everything. Well, I want you to risk something. I want you to have a good time with it. And I want you to enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. And sometimes that means being involved with your staff, getting to know your patients well over a long period of time. I want you to remember a practice is best when it is your practice, not just a practice or not just the office. Now, again, a little area of controversy, but I want to make sure I've stated this. Practice purchase is great when it's practical and when it's reasonable. But I have a lot of young doctors who are coming to me now, and they're saying, should I buy this practice? Should I ever buy a practice? Is it a good idea to own something? And I've got to tell you the truth. Yeah, I think it is. Do I think it's wise to own a building? For the most part, I'm going to give you a general truism. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to own assets on behalf of the practice. Most healthcare accountants will tell you the same thing. It just means the practice has assets, and that's a good thing. I'm not going to say that it's always easy, but I will say ultimately your job is to acquire something that has lasting value. But trying to buy a practice at some times when there are no practices available, don't kill yourself to do this. If you have to start up, it's going to take you time and it's going to take you effort, and you will have more fun than you can imagine. That counts too. Sellers and their brokers are not in the business to make you rich and to make you comfortable. That's not their job. So they're going to try to get you to purchase a practice for as much as they possibly can. That's their job. And when you are selling your practice and get a broker, you'll probably do the same thing. That's part of the business. But don't assume that just because someone's selling a practice, it's a good idea. They may want to make themselves rich and comfortable on your back. And incidentally, that's one reason why people call demographers like me. They want to say, in the future, is the practice going to increase in value? And to tell you the truth, that's really what a demographer is there to do. Well, we'll talk about risk and we'll talk about projected value. And I want you to remember something. Please don't forget. There is always going to be something that you don't know about a practice, an office, the staff, other doctors in the area, and about your community. They're just things you can't know. Now, you want to get rid of the unknown as much as you can. They call that the uncertainty elimination theory. It's a communications theory. It makes us happy when we know more stuff. But just don't assume you're going to know everything. You have to accept some things on reasonable faith if you've done your due diligence. Now, sometimes your only option is to be brave or stupid, and that means basically doing a startup. It's okay. Lots of other people have done startups, long hours sometimes, a little risk. Got it. And I recommend you think about it. I also want you to remember your significant other is significant in these decisions. You know that the only person who can own a healthcare practice other than a doctor is a doctor's spouse, and they're permitted to do that. They are significant, your significant other, and anything you can do to treat them like they're made of gold and can be broken if shattered, well, they're worth protecting. You're going to need each other. And the same thing's true of a doctor who is a partner. I believe that good partners are worth their weight in platinum. They're fantastic. But you better shop long and hard for a partner, even if they're a sibling. Never forget, healthcare is actually a small business. A lot of people forget it. And you have to work and slave and struggle as though it is. And just like all other small businesses, sometimes you have to do things to sacrifice as though it is a child. Having a family business is part of the American dream. So I would recommend you bring in your kids, your significant other, your family, cousins, whatever, to help. It benefits everybody. That includes spouses and kids, remember. Now, I want to say something that may sound a little controversial as well, and that is hard work pays off. Do not assume that you got into healthcare because you just wanted to be wealthy. Yeah, I think you got in the wrong business. Should have gone into finance, banking. There you go, plastics. But hard work will pay off. Just remember, it only pays off eventually, not today and maybe not tomorrow. But that doesn't mean the risks of having your own practice are not worth it. I want you to also remember that Scott McDonald told you this. Quick fixes and easy answers are neither quick nor easy. Don't believe them. And there is no shortcut or quick fix to success. Always question those who have nothing at risk in their solutions. Now, I say this because there are lots of consultants out there. They may be fantastic, and people who are like consultants who may claim that they've got the magic solution, the secret sauce, if you will, to practice success. I've heard them. I've spent hours in their lectures. I appreciate what they have to say. Really, I do. But I'm just saying, be very cautious with anything that anybody tells you if they don't have their money on the line too. Old and cautious consultants are better than smart and slick consultants. I believe in trusting the wrinkles and the occasional bald spots. And I say that because I have a lot of bald spots and a fair number of wrinkles. What I mean by this is, if you're trying to figure out, is the person who's talking to me serious and valuable, then you're going to have to recognize they got that knowledge someplace. Where do they get it? Do I trust them? And you'll usually find those who have been in business a long time are generally more trustworthy than those who just graduated with a great business degree or out of a program. They may mean well, but I'm always cautious. Now, I have a few things that I'm calling scattered wisdom in my 10th commandment. Scattered wisdom means these are just things that I picked up that I want you to write down and think about. Number one, I want you to play the long game. There is no benefit in healthcare to playing the short game. You don't make a killing in healthcare. Oh, yeah, some people will tell you, you just get this practice, this building, this equipment, you're going to do great. The long game suggests that you've got to get full value of your time and effort. That's the long game. Private practice is worth it. I genuinely believe that, but the real joy is in the journey to getting there. Almost everybody, when they retire or they sell their office, is a little sorry about giving it up. They like what they do. I want you to like what you do. And I genuinely believe that what you sacrifice for is worth it. Young doctors, you got into the profession to control your destiny. It isn't because it's easy. I hope you didn't do it because there's no risk. There are risks in healthcare. Having a practice means you're going to have staff and you're going to have vendors. You're going to have accountants, people that you have to trust. But it doesn't mean you give up that trust. It means you take account for everything everybody else does. You control your destiny in healthcare much more than almost any other profession that's out there. Now, being rich is subjective. There are many poor people who have money, a lot of poor people that have big bank accounts. I want you to remember that is not what makes a person rich. Having too much debt is not something, I don't care how much money you earn, getting out of debt is wise. And if you can get rid of those pressures in your life, so much the better. Now, ultimately, I've been studying game theory. If you don't know game theory, it's a mathematical model of statistical interactions among what they call rational agents. Roger Myerson is the one who came up with it. And the book, by the way, Game Theory Analysis of Conflict, it is actually kind of brilliant. I'm drawing a lot of what I'm telling you from game theory. It may sound like I'm being kind of folksy in my wisdom, and yes, I am a folksy kind of guy, maybe a little corny, but I don't charge very much, and I've been in practice or in business a lot longer than almost any other demographer you've met. I want you to understand that variables can be measured to determine your potential success. That's what game theory really is. You're looking at what can be measured and predicted, and that's why demography is a part of healthcare, to determine whether or not the value of a practice in the area you're working in will continue to be of value. Competition ratios are not determinative of predictive outcome. Now, here's the thing I'm getting at. I know a lot of people who will say, oh, just tell me how many competitors there are. Well, that assumes that all competition's the same, and it is not. It also assumes that the patient base is always the same, and it is not. It assumes that your skills are not going to make an impact upon the profitability of your practice. They will. So just be a little bit cautious when people start throwing around competition ratios without explaining their genuine meaning. Now, let me tell you something. I do a lot of telephone consultations. And what that means is I get on the phone, actually on the computer screen, and I talk to the doctors. I'll get the data and share with them where I got the data, and I'll explain what it means. The ideal sites are there, even though right now it may appear as though there are no ideal sites out there. There's risk everywhere. Why did I get into this? I should have gone into Amway with my uncle or something, or a Mary Kay Cosmetics with my aunt. But remember, data is easy. Analysis is what you need and want. That's what I provide. My team is excellent because we emphasize not just getting data, but telling you what the data means. That's why we do these things. Now, yes, I can generate competition reports, practice viability reports, competition analysis. I can do all those things for you. But the purpose of it is actually to reduce your risk and to help you figure out what is going to work. Now, I'm also going to throw out one other thing. And I know most of you are young doctors or not even in school yet. If you are in a program, I provide free lectures online to your classes. So we'll talk about where in the United States they should consider going or avoiding, the places with the kiss of death. So you can schedule me for an appointment. If you're in practice and you've got a dental or medical society, a study group, whatever, I can provide you an information on what's going on in your area, what is likely to happen. That's the business that I'm in. So consider getting a speech from me. We do these speeches by proposal. You tell us dates and times and locations, and we can tell you how much it'll cost. So get a bid. Ultimately, you need to know in advance how much it's going to cost and what the content's going to be. Now, if you want to write to me, you can reach me at info@drdemographics.com, or you can go to drdemographics.com and see the products and services. We only have 4 key services, but we do vary them according to the specialties that you might be in. Now, listen, everybody, I'm going to say something that's a little maudlin. I really like the doctors I work with. I love you people. I love young couples that are trying to figure it out, gals trying to resolve how do I make the best steps to move forward in my career. I'm a little homespun. I don't come across super slick, and that's part of the reason is I want you to believe me when I tell you something. But I couldn't be prouder of working with the great men and women who I've met in healthcare. If I can help you in your way, help you through school, help you figure out your next steps, please don't hesitate to give me a call. I look forward to talking to you to find the perfect place to put a practice. I'm Scott McDonald at drdemographics.com. Take care.